June 6, 1944. 0007 hours, north of Carentan, Normandy. The match trembled slightly as Obergefreiter Rudolf Thiel lit his cigarette, squinting into the darkness that had settled over the Norman countryside. Through the night air came a sound that made him freeze, the low drone of aircraft engines, hundreds of them, growing louder with each passing second. Within minutes, Thiel would frantically crank his field telephone, becoming the first German soldier to report what would prove to be the largest airborne assault in military history. His message, logged at precisely 0011 hours, would mark the beginning of a catastrophic intelligence failure that would see 13,348 American paratroopers, along with 3,937 American glider troops and thousands of British and Canadian airborne forces, descend behind German lines. The German defensive forces in Normandy on June 6th represented formidable combat power, at least on paper. The 91st Luftlandser Infantry Division under Generalleutnant Wilhelm Falli controlled the central Cotentin Peninsula with 12,000 men. The 709th Static Infantry Division, commanded by Generalleutnant Karl Wilhelm von Schlieben, defended the eastern coast, including what would become Utah Beach, with 12,320 soldiers. The veteran 352nd Infantry Division, under Generalleutnant Dietrich Kreis, held the sector that included Omaha Beach, with approximately 12,000 troops. Most significantly, the elite 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, Germany's own paratroopers, had been attached to reinforce the defence. These 4,500 men, commanded by Major Friedrich August Freiherr von der Heydte, averaged just 17.5 years old, but represented some of the best-trained soldiers in the Wehrmacht. The German High Command had anticipated some form of airborne operation. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel himself had overseen the installation of over 1 million wooden poles, Rommelspagel or Rommel's asparagus, across potential landing zones throughout Normandy. These obstacles, standing 4 to 5 metres tall and placed 23 to 30 metres apart, were designed to destroy gliders and entangle parachutes. By April 1944, one corps alone had erected over 900,000 such stakes. But the Field Marshal was not in Normandy this night. He was in Germany, visiting his wife Lucy for her birthday, confident that the weather conditions made an invasion impossible. At 7 minutes past midnight on June 6th, the war came to Obergefreiter Günther Prignitz of the 13th Company, Fallschirmjäger Regiment 6, in the most unexpected way. Stationed at Saint-Georges-de-Beauon, he was jolted from his tent by the sound of their ground observer firing his weapon and shouting, "Alarm! Parachutes! Military gliders!" Prignitz stumbled into the darkness and encountered an American paratrooper hanging from a massive tree, his leg clearly broken, moaning in English, "Oh, oh, broken leg." As Prignitz later recounted, I disarmed him and spoke calmingly to him. He was probably the first American prisoner of war of the Battle of Normandy. Across the regiment's positions, similar encounters were unfolding. Eugen Grieser, serving in the 2nd Battalion, described the Americans as mostly young boys, around 20 big and strong guys, who carried around half a colonial wares store in their pockets, including rations in cans, chewing gum, chocolate, reserve ammunition, pictures of naked girls, and even explosives. At 1:30 hours, General der Artillerie Erich Marx, commanding the 84th Corps responsible for the entire invasion sector, received his first coherent report of enemy paratroopers landing between Sainte-Marie-du-Mont and Sainte-Mère-Église. The 53-year-old general, who had lost a leg on the Eastern Front and walked with a prosthetic, immediately understood the implications. But where was the main effort? The drops seemed scattered, chaotic, without clear tactical purpose. German doctrine, based on their own airborne operations, assumed that paratroopers would concentrate on specific strategic objectives. These Americans appeared to be everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Marx ordered Kampfgruppe Meyer from the 915th Grenadier Regiment south of Carentan to investigate the reported drops. It was a fatal decision. Kampfgruppe Meyer would spend the entire night and morning navigating narrow Norman lanes in darkness, chasing reports that proved false or exaggerated. By 700 hours, when they finally received accurate intelligence, they were exhausted, disoriented, and 20 miles from where they were needed most. The command situation deteriorated further with each passing hour. Generaloberst Friedrich Dollmann, commanding the 7th Army, was in Rennes conducting a wargame exercise with his division commanders, an exercise premised on how to respond to an Allied invasion of Normandy. Most critically, at approximately 400 hours, General-Lieutenant Wilhelm Falley made a decision that would cost him his life. Having heard aircraft engines from the headquarters he was visiting, the general decided to race back to his command post. His staff car, speeding through darkness outside Château de Berneville, ran directly into a patrol from the 82nd Airborne Division. Lieutenant Malcolm Dodge Brannin of the 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment shot the general, making Falley the first German general killed on D-Day. The German communication network began failing almost immediately. Radio connections between units stopped functioning. The carefully laid telephone lines fell silent one by one as paratroopers cut cables they encountered. Oberleutnant Martin Dietrich, communications officer for the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, later described, "Nothing worked." The radios produced only static. We learned later the Americans were jamming every frequency. The telephone lines were cut in dozens of places. In desperation, I tried the French civilian telephone system, and surprisingly it worked. The resistance, it seemed, had scruples against harming property of the French state. German radar stations from Cherbourg to Le Havre had been systematically jammed starting at 2300 hours on June 5th. The primary Luftwaffe radar station at Douvres-la-Délivrande would have its antennas destroyed by naval gunfire at dawn. Fixed transmitters with code names Bagpipe and Chatter, broadcasting from England, filled German radio frequencies with noise. The Wehrmacht's intelligence service, the Abwehr, might have provided warning, but Hitler himself had abolished it in February 1944 after discovering its chief, Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, had been involved in anti-Nazi activities. The service had been absorbed into the SS Reich Security Main Office, where political reliability mattered more than competence. Major Friedrich von der Heydte, the aristocratic commander of Fallschirmjäger Regiment 6, began his own investigation at first light. A veteran of Crete, where German paratroopers had suffered grievous losses, he understood airborne operations better than perhaps any other German officer in Normandy. At 6 o'clock hours, he began personally interrogating captured American paratroopers in Carentan. What he discovered stunned him. These weren't commandos on a raid. These were full divisions, the 82nd and 101st Airborne. Von der Heydte would later write in his memoirs, "The Pathfinders particularly impressed me. They had shaved their heads except for a thin stripe in the middle, what they called a mohawk, and painted their faces with green and brown camouflage. When Hauptmann Trebes saw them, he commented, 'Now they're sending us their Indians.'" Each American paratrooper carried between 70 and 120 pounds of equipment. Their main parachutes were supplemented by reserve chutes, a luxury German paratroopers had never enjoyed. They carried the M1 Garand semi-automatic rifle, which could fire 8 rounds as quickly as a soldier could pull the trigger, while most German infantry still carried bolt-action Kar 98K rifles. Every American had multiple flashlights with spare batteries. They carried morphine syringes for immediate pain relief. Their rations included not just food, but cigarettes, chocolate, and chewing gum. They even carried cricket clickers, small metal devices for identification in darkness. One German soldier noted dismissively, "This idea that the Americans had to communicate in the dark with these children's toys wasn't very intelligent." He failed to understand that only a nation with unlimited resources would issue such devices to every soldier. The battle for Sainte-Mère-Église demonstrated the shock and speed of the American assault. This small town of 2,500 inhabitants sat astride Route Nationale 13, the main road from Cherbourg to Carentan, making it crucial for any German counterattack. The German garrison consisted of just 41 men from the 91st Division, reinforced by Osttruppen, Eastern European conscripts whose reliability was questionable. They were equipped with 2 anti-aircraft guns and a handful of machine guns. At 0430 hours, Lieutenant Colonel Edward Krause's 3rd Battalion of the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment attacked with just 30 to 40 men, all he could gather from the scattered drop. By 0500 hours, Krause had raised the American flag over the town hall. The German garrison simply evaporated. 30 were captured, 11 were killed. Throughout June 6th and 7th, elements of the 1058th Regiment launched counterattacks from positions near Fauville, 2 kilometres south. These attacks, supported by concealed 88mm anti-tank guns, turned the southern approaches into a killing ground. Between 8:30 and noon on June 6th, First Lieutenant Richard Winters led what military academies would later teach as a textbook small unit action at Brécourt Manor. The German position consisted of 4 105mm howitzers, manned by approximately 60 soldiers from the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment. Reinforcements from the elite 1st Battalion who had arrived to find the original garrison had deserted. Winters had just 17 men initially, eventually reinforced to 24. Using fire and maneuver tactics, the Americans systematically destroyed each gun position. The assault yielded an intelligence windfall, a complete map case showing all German positions in the Cotentin Peninsula. Winters' casualties: 4 dead and 6 wounded. German losses: 15 killed, 12 wounded, and 23 captured. Lafayette Bridge over the Meurdere River would witness what historian S.L.A. Marshall called probably the bloodiest small unit struggle in the experience of American arms. A company of the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment reached the bridge first, securing it by 0900 hours on D-Day. The German counterattack came at 1600 hours. Elements of the 1057th Grenadier Regiment reinforced by 3 captured French light tanks. The Germans used captured American paratroopers as human shields, forcing them to walk in front of the tanks. The fighting around Lafayette would continue for 3 days. A company suffered an 86% casualty rate, 46 killed and 81 wounded from 147 men. The 91st Luftlandedivision Division lost 2,212 men in the first 6 days of fighting around this single bridge. German intelligence had completely failed to detect the creation and training of the American airborne divisions. The 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions had been conducting massive exercises in England for over 2 years. The marshalling of 822 C-47 transport aircraft went entirely unnoticed. Even the painting of distinctive black and white invasion stripes on all Allied aircraft occurred without German knowledge. The Germans expected airborne landings relatively far from the beaches, targeting strategic objectives deep behind lines. Their own doctrine, based on operations in Holland and Crete, emphasized deep penetration. They couldn't conceive that the Allies would use airborne forces as super infantry, dropping them just miles behind beaches to secure the immediate beachhead. The 91st Luftlandedivision Division had been moved to Normandy in May 1944, specifically to counter expected airborne assault, with the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment attached for anti-airborne expertise. Yet despite keeping 1/3 of troops in position day and night in possible landing zones, they were caught completely off guard when the assault came. Operation Titanic deployed 400 dummy paratroopers, 3-foot-tall Hessian cloth figures equipped with explosive charges and pintail noisemakers simulating rifle fire. These Ruperts successfully diverted the entire 915th Grenadier Regiment from beach defences. The unit spent critical hours searching woods for phantom paratroopers instead of heading to invasion beaches. Field Marshal von Rundstedt ordered the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, to deal with supposed parachute landings near Lisieux that consisted solely of dummies. This elite unit, which could have influenced the battle at Omaha Beach if committed early, instead spent D-Day morning searching for enemies that didn't exist. German after-action reports from June 20th acknowledged, "In several locations the paratroopers turned out to be puppets with explosives in their crates. The goal? To divide our local reserves and disengage them from their crucial position." As dawn broke on June 6th, German soldiers grasped the technological chasm between themselves and their enemies. American paratroopers carried SCR-536 handy-talkie radios, allowing squad-level communication. German infantry relied on runners or signal flags. The Americans had M1 Garand rifles with 8-round clips, while most Germans carried bolt-action rifles designed in the 1890s. The medical equipment stunned German soldiers. Every American carried sulfanilamide powder and morphine syrettes. American medics carried blood plasma that could be administered in field conditions. Each K-ration contained canned meat, crackers, chocolate, cigarettes, chewing gum, variety that represented impossible abundance to Germans subsisting on black bread and ersatz coffee. Werner Kortenhaus of the 21st Panzer Division, engaging British paratroopers around the Orne bridges, would later reflect, "We were still a horse-drawn army pretending to be mechanized. They were a truly mechanized force. When I saw American paratroopers eating chocolate while under fire, smoking cigarettes from endless supplies, treating wounds with medicines we hadn't seen since 1942, I knew the war was lost." The German armoured response revealed complete command breakdown. The 21st Panzer Division, the only armoured unit immediately available, couldn't receive permission to move until noon on D-Day. Hitler had reserved personal control over panzer movements and was asleep at his mountain retreat. His staff feared waking him. When General Major Edgar Feuchtinger finally received permission to attack at 16:20 hours, he had to recall units scattered across Normandy where they'd been sent chasing reported paratrooper landings. Of 124 tanks that started the assault, 70 were destroyed or disabled by day's end, stopped by naval gunfire, fighter bombers, and airborne troops with bazookas, not American tanks which hadn't yet landed in significant numbers. Throughout D-Day, German units fought in increasing isolation. At 10 o'clock hours, General Marx told division commanders, "The fate of Germany and this conflict depends on your counterattack." But orders took hours to reach frontline units. Some never arrived. The Wehrmacht's Auftragstaktik, mission-type tactics encouraging initiative, collapsed when junior officers had no idea what the mission was. Without communication from higher headquarters, units attempted to attack beaches, hunt paratroopers, and hold positions simultaneously, accomplishing none effectively. Major von der Heiter's 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment exemplified the problem. His units were scattered across 30 square miles. The 1st Battalion was destroyed trying to retreat to Carentan. The 2nd Battalion was pinned near Saint-Côme-du-Mont. The 3rd Battalion, FJR 6, simply disappeared. Von der Heiter wouldn't learn until after the war that they had been surrounded and captured almost intact. The scattered nature of the drops, only 1 in 6 American sticks landed near intended drop zones, some missing by over 20 miles, became strategic advantage. Instead of concentrated drops that could be contained, Germans faced paratroopers everywhere. German intelligence estimated 20,000 to 25,000 American paratroopers had landed, nearly double the actual 13,348. The scattered paratroopers attacked whatever Germans they encountered with aggressiveness born of excellent training and the knowledge that safety lay only in victory. This convinced German commanders they faced a much larger force. By noon on D-Day, Germans had captured several hundred American paratroopers. Their interrogations revealed these weren't commandos on a raid, but the advance guard of an invasion involving millions. Feldwebel Ernst Wagner, assigned to guard prisoners near Carentan, wrote in his diary about their unshakable confidence. Wounded American prisoners received medical treatment with plasma, morphine and sulfur drugs that hadn't been seen in German field hospitals for over a year. The British 6th Airborne Division's operations proved equally devastating on the eastern flank. Landing 8,500 men by parachute and glider, they seized crucial bridges over the Orne River and Caen Canal. Major Hans von Lux Kampfgruppe from the 21st Panzer Division received landing reports at 1:30 hours, but couldn't get permission to attack for 8 hours. By then, British positions were consolidated with naval gunfire support available. The glider assault on Pegasus Bridge stunned German defenders. 6 Horsa gliders landed within yards of targets, delivering troops who seized the bridge in 10 minutes. The guards, miles behind what they thought was the front, were completely surprised. Major von der Heiter's post-war analysis proved unsparing. The caliber of the American paratroopers who fought against the regiment was outstanding. They were excellently trained in combat techniques, and their armament and equipment were first class. In the opinion of the German parachute troops, the American 101st Airborne Division, and particularly its 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, far surpassed the other American airborne units. German paratroopers particularly noted American flexibility. German Fallschirmjäger trained to follow detailed plans. When plans fell apart, they often became paralyzed. American paratroopers thrived on chaos, forming ad hoc groups and attacking targets of opportunity. The statistics reveal the true impact Allied airborne forces: 822 American C-47 transport aircraft, 13,348 American paratroopers jumped, 3,937 American glider troops, 8,500 British and Canadian airborne troops. Total Allied airborne strength, approximately 25,785. German casualties, first week, 91st Luftlandedivision, Division, 8,000 casualties from 12,000 men, 67% loss rate. 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, 3,000 casualties from 4,500 men, 67% loss rate. Various other units, approximately 5,000 casualties. Total, approximately 16,000 German casualties directly attributable to airborne operations. These losses among elite units couldn't be replaced. Germany lacked both training infrastructure and transport aircraft for new airborne forces. American losses, 2,499 casualties on D-Day alone, were replaced within weeks. Tactically, the D-Day airborne operations appeared mixed. Units missed drop zones. Casualties were heavy. Many objectives weren't achieved on schedule. Yet strategically, they succeeded completely. They prevented effective German defense of invasion beaches and paralyzed decision-making during the critical first 48 hours. General Heinrich Eberbach, who would command Panzer Group West, later wrote, "The Allied airborne operations on D-Day were decisive. Not in the tactical sense, many objectives were not immediately achieved, but operationally, they prevented us from implementing our defensive plans." German intelligence had missed everything: the creation of American airborne divisions, their 2-year training program, the assembly of transport aircraft, even the painting of invasion stripes. Operation Fortitude's deception proved so successful that the German 15th Army's 150,000 men remained in the Pas-de-Calais until late July, awaiting an invasion that never came. Colonel Alexis von Roener of Foreign Armies West had provided accurate assessments before D-Day, but Hitler and the High Command dismissed his reports in favour of their preconceptions. The impact extended throughout the war. German forces remained fixated on airborne threats, holding reserves back from fronts to guard against landings. When the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich was ordered from southern France as reinforcement after D-Day, they took 2 weeks to reach Normandy, a journey that should have taken 3 days, delayed by resistance attacks and constant fear of paratroopers. Operation Market Garden in September 1944, despite ultimately failing, confirmed German fears by dropping 3.5 divisions in daylight. This caution, born from D-Day's shock, contributed to the speed of Allied advance across France. The airborne operations represented something profound: the democratization of elite military capability. German Fallschirmjäger were carefully selected volunteers, many from aristocratic families with military traditions. American paratroopers were citizen soldiers, farm boys, factory workers, students, who volunteered for $50 monthly jump pay. Yet these citizens outfought professional warriors, showing initiative and skill exceeding opponents with years more combat experience. They fought not for glory, but to finish a job and go home. Franz Gockel, the teenage machine gunner from Omaha Beach who later emigrated to America, would tell military audiences, "The paratroopers changed everything. We were prepared to defend beaches. But when we heard paratroopers were behind us, everything changed. Were we surrounded? Should we retreat? Your paratroopers won the battle before the first landing craft reached the beach." Eric Bissoir, participating in 2014 reconciliation meetings, remembered, "I saw with my own eyes how they jumped straight into our positions. Sadly, this was terrible for the poor guys on the chutes." As night fell on June 6th, German forces faced a fundamentally changed battlefield. Field Marshal von Rundstedt's evening report to Hitler captured it. "The enemy has succeeded in creating confusion in our rear areas through extensive airborne landings. The scale and coordination exceed our previous estimates of enemy capability." Hitler blamed commanders for lack of will and refused to release reserves, still convinced the main attack would come at the Pas-de-Calais. On June 7th, the 17th SS Panzer Grenadier Division spent the day clearing reported paratroopers from assembly areas instead of counter-attacking beaches. By the time they were ready, Americans had consolidated inland positions. The opportunity had passed. Major von der Heydte, writing post-war for professional military journals, provided the definitive assessment. The American airborne assault on D-Day represented more than a military operation. It demonstrated a new form of national power, the ability to project force vertically, transform civilian youth into elite soldiers, coordinate complex operations across vast distances, and sustain operations through industrial production. We Germans thought ourselves masters of modern warfare. We invented blitzkrieg, pioneered airborne operations, developed combined arms tactics. But Americans had industrialized them, democratized them, deployed them on a scale we never imagined possible. The 13,348 American paratroopers who jumped into Normandy shattered our conception of what was militarily possible. They proved democratic nations could create forces equal to any authoritarian regime, that citizen soldiers could match professional warriors, that industrial production could overcome tactical skill. In the darkness of June 5th to 6th, 1944, we heard hundreds of aircraft engines. We saw thousands of parachutes blossoming. We fought scattered groups of determined young Americans. And we learned our 1,000-year Reich had challenged forces beyond our comprehension. The vertical envelopment of Normandy proved the arsenal of democracy had created a new form of warfare that authoritarian regimes could neither match nor defeat. German soldiers learned this truth through defeat by an enemy they'd been taught to despise. As dawn broke on June 7th, 1944, German defenders faced a battlefield transformed. Behind their Atlantic wall, American paratroopers controlled key terrain, disrupted communications, and prevented coordinated response. The German soldiers had not anticipated that 13,348 American paratroopers would land behind their lines. When they did, they brought the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany and the dawn of American military supremacy in the modern age.